Crooked Joe Biden and the radical left thugs who have weaponized law enforcement to arrest their leading political opponent, and leading by a lot, including Obama. I'll tell you what, you take a look at Obama and take a look at some of the things that he's done. This is the same thing. The country was very divided. And we did with Obama. We won an election that everyone said couldn't be won.
Trump says that Biden is too cognitively impaired to lead the country, which is what Biden has been doing this whole time. And Trump says that having a guy like Biden in charge will eventually lead to World War II. That's World War II, not World War III. Look, if you say a lot of words, especially publicly, there is simply a higher probability that some of the things you say publicly will be dumb.
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation, the beginnings of that investigation.
The latest act of resistance is the op-ed published in the failing New York Times by an anonymous, gutless coward.
One of their political weapons is cancel culture, driving people from their jobs, shaming dissenters, and demanding total submission from anyone who disagrees. This is the very definition of totalitarianism.
They don't want voter ID. I saw on the television one of these characters. There shouldn't be voter ID. Now you have voter ID to buy a loaf of bread. You have ID to buy a loaf of bread. You have everything. You have pictures. When they had their Democrat National Convention, they had a picture, the biggest thing I've ever seen.
And it's fun to laugh at the awkward things that public figures say in speeches or interviews or whatever, because they always do, and they will continue to do so. But most of the time, that's as far as it goes. Now, commentators, pundits, and comedians can and will attempt to extrapolate deeper meaning from these gaffes, but for the most part, it's just someone putting their foot in their mouth on camera in front of millions of people. Now, that said, this particular instance of Trump saying the wrong thing, the factual wrong thing, not just something politically incorrect or unsavory, is particularly ironic because he's trying to make the point that his opponent, the incumbent president of the United States, is mentally unfit to lead the country. And he warns that having a guy like Biden in charge could mean a nuclear war, a war unlike any war the world has ever seen before. He said the wrong number, yes, but moving past that, he's basically saying that Biden is so unaware of what's going on around him that one moment of cognitive impairment could mean disaster for the entire planet. But Trump knows that's not how it works. He knows that the president of the United States does not have absolute consolidated power like that of maybe a monarch or a dictator. There are checks on the president within the White House and in Congress and even within the court system. In fact, we've heard stories from various high-level officials who worked in the Trump administration about how they had to manage Trump's worst impulses and how they had to assume that he would forget about decrees he'd make, and then, yeah, he would forget about them.
America's top general, just 2 days after the January 6th Capitol insurrection, so worried about the then president's angry and erratic behavior, he called a secret meeting with top deputies, including the chain of command for the country's nuclear arsenal. General Mark Milley's message at that meeting: no one was to act on any orders for military strikes, even from the president, unless Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was personally involved in the sign-off as called for by Pentagon protocols.
A former Trump aide recently came out speaking about how they would have to dumb down classified memos for him, writing them in bombastic and incandescently stupid language that would be insulting to the intelligence of most children. Of course, this isn't difficult to believe about a guy who, as we hear, isn't very fond of reading. According to the aide, quote, "This 50-page memo that we would normally give to any other president about what his options are is something Trump literally can't read. The man doesn't read." And speaking of classified documents, Trump's former assistant told investigators that Trump would write to-do lists for her on the backs of classified documents.
One of Donald Trump's closest aides has told federal investigators that the former president wrote her notes, specifically to-do lists, on the back of documents marked classified, using the documents as if they were pieces of scrap paper.
The aide, Molly Michaels, said that she would regularly get requests or to-do lists from her former boss written on the backs of note cards, but then she realized that the note cards were actually classified memos discussing things like phone calls with world leaders and other international affairs. And Trump is worried that Joe Biden is going to thoughtlessly plunge us into the next world war. By the way, we we all know, and Trump should know, that the president isn't the one who declares wars. That is the job of Congress. One unhinged man in the Oval Office, whether that's Biden or Trump, isn't going to declare a nuclear war on anyone. Anyway, something else that's funny about all of this is that The Guardian reported on Trump's World War II bit, and in the article they had to clarify that we have already had 2 world wars, the first ending in 1918 and the second ending in 1945. The idea that the things Trump says, even the most asinine and the most witless, require clarification simply because of who he is in American culture is indicative of a sad state of affairs. If Trump supporters don't know that there have already been 2 world wars in the first half of the 20th century, what else don't they know? Now, I'm going to assume very graciously that they do know at least that much, but honestly, I can't be sure anymore. But then you get into the issue of fact-checking public figures, including former presidents and current presidential candidates. Every time Trump does an interview or participates in a debate or holds a rally, news organizations are immediately overwhelmed by their own efforts to fact-check the things that he says. He bombs his audience with so many lies so quickly that it makes any normal person's head spin. And that's the point. That's the goal. It's a tactic that has been used time and time again by various fascistic regimes around the world, and I'm sure you can imagine which ones I'm referring to. And it's a deliberate tactic that's meant to disrupt one's sense of reality. People don't know what's real and what's fake anymore, and most people, I would say, assume that people are telling them the truth. Even in a time when people seem increasingly skeptical and distrusting of media and public figures, they still tend to take things at face value. They are still surprisingly gullible. Now, you would think that all of this media exposure that we have now would have at least made us a little bit more media literate, but it seems that the opposite has happened with all this noise and distraction around us. And unfortunately, that is a thing that is positive for a guy like Trump. That's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to follow me on all the socials. Also, please don't forget to check out my podcast, Modern Context, available wherever you get podcasts. Episode 3 is out right now. Thanks.